Hello, happy Sunday. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria and I am here from the future, present, somewhat past. I am here because I started this vlog after I was sick and forgot to do an intro. So I just want to pop in and say hello. This is like a reading vlog from like a week and a half or so in my life. So we're going to be talking some books, we're going to be talking some plans, we're going to be talking some books that I'm hoping to read. And also making a quick trip to Florida. And yeah, so I hope you enjoy. And I will see you at the end of the vlog. Hello, happy Monday. We are back from the dead, if you will. I mentioned in my last video, briefly, that I had come down with a bit of malaise. And so was down for the count most of last week. That's just what it was. But we are back in action pretty much right as rain. But it's gonna be a busy week this week, so I am actually going back to Florida on a Wednesday early in the morning. So not much to do here in between now and then besides a little bit of packing. But I thought I would give you a reading update because I did read one book last week, even though I was feeling down and outs, and that was The Inheritance Game by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This was a perfect read for a sick day. It's young adult, so it moves fast. The chapters are short. There's a little bit of intrigue. We've got a little bit of a love triangle in here. We've got some rich people drama and, a kind of a Cinderella-esque story going on here. Just to reiterate what this book is about, it's about Avery Grams. So she is a junior, I believe, 17-year-old at this time when the book starts, and she is kind of down and out. Her mother passed away 2 years before, and that was really her only relative. She's, working very hard to make ends meet to go to college and really set herself up for success later on in life. She is staying with her half-sister on and off again because her half-sister has a boyfriend who is a total incomplete asshole. And all of a sudden, she gets called down to the principal's office one day and is told that this rich billionaire in Dallas, Texas, has requested that she be there for the will reading, and they can't do it until she's there. So her and her sister get flown out there and come to find out that this rich billionaire, whom she, to the best of her knowledge, has never met before in her life, has left pretty much his entire estate to her, and has put a stipulation on it that she must live within the Hawthorne estate, in the Hawthorne house, for a year in order to receive this inheritance. And she can't kick out any of the Hawthorne family unless there is a threat to her life. And then they can be asked to leave. But only that person, not everybody else. So this kind of thrusts her in the middle of this family, and we have the 4 Hawthorne sons who we get to know a little bit better. The 2 primary brothers that we get to know the most are Grayson, who's kind of like our dreary, grumpy guy, and then we have Jameson, who is a bit of a enigmatic character. He's really into puzzles, and he thinks that his grandfather has created the last great puzzle for their family to solve, for the brothers to solve. And so she kind of gets entangled up with them and is trying to unravel the mysteries of why perhaps the Hawthorne estate has been left to her. So like I said, this is a lot of fun and games. I thought it was a pretty quick read. I give it 4 stars. I want to read the rest of the series. Sometimes I just really like to read a book where we can just breeze through it and have a great time. I read it in like a couple hours when I was feeling feverish. So, I guess that's not the best recommendation by saying I was in a fevered state, but I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the books in the series. So that's my update. I'm gonna get some water, and I'll be right back because I've been out shopping. And we're back. All right, so couple other things. As I mentioned, I was out and about this morning, this afternoon. I went to the chiropractor because after being sick for a couple days, my body was inconsolable. So I went to Half Price Books because it's kind of close to where my chiropractor is, just looking for a couple things, and hauled a few books, so I figured I'd share that with you. So the first book that I hauled was Grave Peril by Jim Butcher. I actually already have the majority of this series and I've read this book previously. However, I've been picking these books up throughout the years from used bookstores, and for some reason Grave Peril was always a hard one to find, but there was one in stock, so I picked it up. So I believe I have like the majority of the series now, except for a couple of the newer ones because I haven't completed the series. I'm actually thinking of doing like a reading vlog series. I would try to do it in one vlog, but there are like 16, 17 books. So I'm not sure how I could fit that in. So I'm thinking of breaking it up. But I did grab this one. It's in pretty good condition, which is nice. It's got a couple, you know, it's got the typical yellowing of like a old paperback. It had a border stickers on there, so that can tell you how old this copy is. Next, I grabbed another Pride and Prejudice copy, so another Borders book. I've picked up a couple different books that are like this that no longer have the sleeves, you know, older books, because I want to do similar what I did to my Jane Austen Opus copy, is do some painting, stenciling, and make these look really pretty. It's something that I've decided I want to continue doing, so every time I see some of these, I've been grabbing them. So we got a copy of Pride and Prejudice. I also picked up a copy of Northanger Abbey and Persuasion like a couple weeks ago, so we're going to add that to the list. Next, speaking of Miss Austen, I saw this there. This is by Fiona Stafford. This is Jane Austen, A Brief Life, and so it's supposed to be like a brief biography of Jane Austen. I figured this would be interesting to read now that I've read all of her books. So, you know, I'm excited to learn a little bit more about Miss Austen and add this to my repertoire. And last but certainly not least, I'm so pissed. I grabbed this copy and didn't notice that the corner is jacked up, but I did pick up Ali Hazelwood's newest release, Bride. So I've never read an Ali Hazelwood before, but I know a lot of people have been saying they've been enjoying this book, and I am a big paranormal romance girly. That is where a lot of my reading started off when I was in high school. So I used to read like Laurel K. Hamilton's books, the Anita Blake series. I used to read the Patricia Briggs Mercy Thompson series. So I was interested in picking this one up since it is a paranormal romance. So I thought for Ali Hazelwood, this might be a good introduction for me because that is one of my particular interests. And so I am excited to give it a go. And I also really like this cover, and I wish that it wasn't damaged. But yeah, I'm excited to give this a read. So that is our book haul. In addition to that, our coffee subscription came in. So if you've seen, I have a couple shorts with it, but I get coffee delivered to me by a company in the Houston area. So it's a Texas company called Many Worlds Taverns, and they have a monthly subscription box called the Treasured Realms, where they'll send you a coffee along with some D&D dice, and on top of that you will also get, they will make like little special items that you can use in your D&D tabletop games. So as a GM, I find those to be fun and helpful, and I try to incorporate them and add a little bit of something to our tabletop games. So I figured I'd show you what we got in this month's box, which is always fun to open up here. So as I mentioned, you'll see here it comes, it's called Treasured Realms. So inside the box you get like this box, it always looks the same. And then every month we get a new coffee. So here is our bag. There. I think I have this dice set before. A sticker of the coffee for the month. So this one is Magnie's Isle. It's got cute little mushrooms on it. Little mushroom village. So for Magnie's Isle is formerly known as Minutia. Magni's Isle is a small, uncharted civilization of humble people ruled by King Magni the Massive, a colossus of a man with the valiance of a knight and the benevolence of a martyr. It was years ago that Magni washed ashore the Minutian coast to the awe of the island's tiny denizens after he warded off the blight of the gigantic, draconic flying creatures that had harassed Minutians with their rainbow-feathered assaults for decades. He was crowned their ruler. Magni enjoyed the honorific, but more notably, he enjoyed his newfound sense of scale. It was quite the elevation of stature from that of a struggling halfling merchant in a city of giants. And it also has the breakdown of the coffee. So the coffee has been growing at Caldat since the mid-1850s, but the anaerobic processing method is quite new, resulting in a brighter, more complex acidity and flavors overall. And then we have our item. So this is Titan's Shiv. It's a greatsword and requires attunement, and this grand, ornately carved greatsword magically fits into a dagger-sized sheath. While attuned, you gain +1 to attack and damage rolls with this greatsword and are able to speak and understand giant. While holding the greatsword and uttering its command word, you can cast Enlarge and Reduce as an action, choosing only yourself as a target. When cast this way, the spell does not require concentration, and its duration lasts until you speak the command word again or put the greatsword back in its sheath. The spell ends if you are rendered unconscious or move more than 30 feet from the blade. While enlarged this way, this weapon also gains the reach property. So, there we go. Fun! It has been a while. As you can see, we are back, baby. We are back in Texas, and I figured I would give you a bit of a reading update because we have been busy reading. So, if you remember our tarot card TBR pick for the month of March, one of the picks was The Memory of Babel by Christelle Dabos. This is the third book in the Mirror Visitor series, and I will try to keep this spoiler free overall. I was trying to be kind of tongue-in-cheek with this because I've got a lot of friends who I keep recommending this book, so I don't want to spoil things for them if they watch these videos, so I'm gonna do my best. But we pick up about 2 years and like 9 months, almost 3 years after the events of the second book in the Mirror Visitor series, which is The Missing of Claire de Lune, and we pick back up with Ophelia, and she is back on her arc of Anima. Again, I'm trying to be very vague about this, but after those events, she ends up back on the arc of Anima, and through a series of through a series of events, ends up on the arc of Babel. And this arc is very, very interesting and very different from Anima and very different from the Pole. I would say what is most interesting about Babel is the amount of rules that they have in this arc in particular. So I would say like Babel is the model arc for where the actors that we were introduced to in the second book are wanting the rest of the arcs to go. There's basically a morality code there, and it is pretty strict. You can get in prison for a lot of things, and there's a lot of covering up of crimes because crimes don't happen in Babel. You can break the moral codes, but crimes don't happen in Babel because the morality codes work. So Ophelia is thrust into this world with very little knowledge of it, only on the pursuit of some clues that she got back in the second book, which pointed her, after much time, to Babel. And so she is trying to unveil those secrets that she started pursuing in the second book. And I have to say, I loved this book. I had such a good time. I know people I've spoken to said the second book was their favorite, but I don't know. I really thought this was super interesting. Maybe it's because we were introduced to a new arc and a new society, and just there were some really sweet moments in here. I really, really like this book. I cannot gush enough about this series. I literally tell everybody that I meet that they should read this series because I don't think the series gets enough love for how talented this writer is. I think the world building in here is great. I think the slow burn romance in this book is fantastic. I love the characters. I think Ophelia's arc has been really great, and I'm so curious to see how this series is going to end because there is only one book left in the series, which I also think is a great reason to pick this series up because you're not going to be reading like 15 books to get to the end. You'll be able to find out what happens to Ophelia and Thorn in one more book, so it's a quartet, and I just can't rave enough about this book. I'm already looking forward to doing a reread because I do feel like there's so many details in here that come back into play later on in some of these books that I'm excited to like reread them and really dive deep into all of that. But a great time. Every time I read these books, I get so excited. They just suck me in. It's a fave. I think this is definitely one of my favorite series that I have ever read. It's so great. So great. So please read them if you haven't. I know I'm behind. Like, I think the last one came out in 2019. But these are great. I want special editions. I want everyone to read them so all of the book boxes and everything can do special editions and make all sorts of pretty things so I can just litter my house with stuff from this series because I love it so much. Next, you have seen that I also, not with an original TBR, but I got some book birthday money for my birthday when I went home to visit my family, and so I did pick up a book that I have been interested in, The Serpent and the Wings of Night, which is part of the Crowns of Nyaxia. It's the book one of the Nightborn duet in the Carissa Broadbent series. So from my understanding, this book is a duology for the House of Night, which is the vampire house that we're following. Like, the main characters in this book are both a part of in different ways, but there are going to be 6 books, I believe, in this series, and they'll all be duologies, and they'll follow the 3 houses of the vampire houses. So we have the House of Night, we have the House of Blood, and we have the House of Shadow. And so the first 2 books are out in that series. This duology is complete, but I first heard about this book, I believe, and I was trying to find it, and if I find the video, I will put it down in the description box. But I believe I heard about this on Booked and Busy. The world that Carissa Broadbent built is based around vampires. So it's called the Crowns of Nyaxia novels. So Nyaxia is the goddess of vampires. So from our understanding in the story, we get a little bit of her background in this story, is that she was like a lesser god, and she escaped the pantheon because these lesser gods were essentially used and abused, and so she didn't want to remain there feeling powerless, and she goes on this long journey to essentially becoming this goddess. And during this war that she caused, she ends up creating a vampire race. And the vampires, unlike vampires that we know, most of them are born vampires. They're not turned. Now, we do have vampires who are turned, but from what we understand, most humans who are turned into vampires do not survive the turning. So the vampire world that we're in, these are people who are born as vampires, and it's very ruthless, and the humans that live under them live in constant fear, even though they have certain protections. And the character that we follow in this book is actually a human. Her name is Oriah, and she is the adopted daughter of the king of the House of Night. She goes by the name of Vincent, and essentially when we pick up with Oriah, she is entering a event that happens every 100 years. It is called, I'm not going to pronounce this right, the Kajari, and it's essentially every 100 years these vampires enter into this tournament that has 5 different competitions that reflects the journey that Nyaxia went through to become who she is and create this vampire society. But she grants the winner of the Kajari a wish, and so we find out that Oriah is basically going to wish to become a vampire that's connected to her adopted father, Vincent. So, they no longer have to live in fear, and she can be able to do the things that she wants, like go back to the village that she was born in and, get revenge on those who killed her family and possibly find her family and things like that. So she's been training for this for a very, very long time, and we are thrust into this and meet our main character, Rain, who is also a Nightborn vampire, but he is part of the other clan. So there are 2 clans. There are the Ryan? Yes, there are the Ryan, and then there are the, it's like Hajari, which is what Vincent's are. And I guess they go back and forth with who rules the House of Night. And Vincent has one of the longest rules ever. He actually won the last Kajari, and that's how he became king. And so she's entering this, and basically it's her going into a dead alliance because she is a human, and it is going to be very difficult for her to compete against vampires. And so we are going through the 5 different trials in here and following her journey, and also her inevitable partnership with Rain and his friend Mishk, who is another vampire who is a very happy vampire and very nice and sweet. So, their unlikely friendship, which, spoiler alert, turns into romance, which is pretty obvious here in the book. So it seems like even in the overview of the book, it basically understands that this romance could be the downfall of the kingdom, which I'm not quite sure. We haven't reached anywhere where that would go now. I am say 70% of the way through the book right now, and I'm right in the smack dab middle of the 4th challenge. So I don't know how their romance will necessarily be the downfall of the kingdom yet, but I am having a good time. So I'm gonna stop here before I continue to ramble, and I will check in with you in a bit. Hello, beautiful people. It is the next day, and we are still struggling with our allergies, but we have made some more progress on the Serpent and the Wings of Night. We've gotten to some of the more steamy scenes of the book, which was an interesting experience. For me, I don't know why. I feel I don't know, there was some funny, to me, what I thought were kind of funny descriptions of different things, which I hadn't felt like I'd read before, which kind of made me giggle a few times because I'm an adult. So I'm an adult. But I'm still enjoying it. We've had some kind of momentous changes in the characters' views of certain things. So I am interested to see kind of how we're going to finish it out. So we've completed the 4th trial, and now we have just the last one, which I don't know if this is going to be a Hunger Games kind of situation where they both get to win or something like that. I'm not sure what the outcome is going to look like on this. It's been a good time. I'm having fun. So we'll probably finish that book up this evening. Maybe. So we have dance tonight. I'm finally going back to dance. But I am trying to get caught up on a few things. So I have some editing to do on this vlog, I guess. Still editing the Jane Austen vlog. It is a work in progress. It's a work in progress. We are working through it, but we've got a lot of things to catch up on. I want to get some writing done. So I think I mentioned this like really briefly at some point in time, but I got together with some other girlies in a Patreon that I'm part of, Allison Page's Patreon, and we did like an unofficial writing group that we put together on Discord. And so we had our first submissions, and so I submitted the first chapter of my fantasy novel that I've started to work on and I'm really excited about. But I've been struggling with balancing writing with my other hobbies, so I've been trying to figure that out. But I do really want to get into it. I do really love the things in my head, and so I do want to get them on paper so I can share them with other people, because there is just something so fun about having other people kind of in that headspace, in the space of the characters that you've been kind of living with, and seeing their reactions and thoughts on it. But it was really cool. 2 lovely people in our writing group read my first chapter and had some really good feedback and some lovely things to say about these characters. So I am excited to possibly share some more with them at a later date. But I want to do hopefully a little bit of that today. I have some consulting stuff to do, and as I mentioned, we're going to dance. But there is a Scottish, Irish, Celtic festival going on in the Dallas kind of area, and so we're thinking of going to that, but that's going to depend on like all of the pollen and the weather and stuff like that, because it is completely outside. So we will see how that goes, but I'm hoping we can make it. If not, I'm going to try to figure out some other things to do possibly this weekend, or just read. I don't know. I gotta take some books back to the library. I've got some books I'm looking at. I found this book, and I'll pop it up somewhere around here on bookshop.org. I'm very excited about it. It's called The House of Frank by Kay Sinclair. And it's a warm and hopeful story of a lonely witch consumed by grief who discovers a whimsical cast of characters in a magical arboretum and the healing power of found family. It's just a little blurb on it. So it's, you know, kind of in the categories of fantasy, fairy tales and folk tales, legends, and it does say there's some LGBTQ representation in here. And it looks super cute. They're putting it kind of under like cozy fantasy. So I am super intrigued and I want to read it now, but it's not going to be out till October. But I'm really excited because that sounds right up my alley. And I also saw that the book Just Stab Me Now came out recently. It came out in February. I haven't seen anybody talk about it, but it sounds pretty interesting. So it's it's a fantasy. I think the way that it is structured is it's a fantasy story that someone is writing. So it says that Caroline Lindy is determined that her new romance novel will be the best one yet. Fantasy, formal gowns, fencing, and of course a 20-something heroine to star in an enemies to lovers plot with all of Carolyn's favorite tropes. I'm saying Carolyn, it might be pronounced Caroline. But Lady Rosamund Hawkhurst is a 36-year-old widow. She has a war to stop and 2 children to get home to, and flatly refuses to take the correct approach to there being only one bed. What's an author to do, especially when discussions with her editor might reveal that he and Rosamund's hot enemy have some suspicious similarities? So it's based on the popular fantasy heroine YouTube short series, and it's a debut novel that brings the best of both worlds, meta and medieval inspired. As enemies to BFFs, Rosamund and Carolyn learn what it means to be the hero of your own story. So, super intriguing. I'm kind of confused by who is the main character. Is like, okay, so Rosamund is her character, who is not a 20-something-year-old heroine. Instead, she's a widow, so is the editor having a problem with it? I've got a lot of questions, and I have not seen anybody talk about it yet, so I'm thinking of picking that up because it sounds silly and cute, and I thought I'd mention it. So those were just some things I wanted to catch up with you. I'm making sure to add that to my story graph to read right now. Yeah, I'm gonna stop rambling now. Let's rewind. I've had an early morning, or an early start to the day. We went volunteering this morning and watched a little bit of Wheel of Time, and I've been working on a couple things for a convention coming up next week, but we finished The Serpent and The Wings of Night. And I've thought a lot about it, and I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. And I know I was telling you that I was enjoying it, and I still did very much. I feel like my head's getting cut off. Maybe if I... I still did very much have a good time overall, but I don't know. There was something that just didn't do it for me. I can't put my finger on it. And so it's like, I was thinking about it this morning when I woke up, and I was like, technically speaking, I don't think there was anything wrong with the story. I think that the author made a series of events that lined up, kind of laid out to where our main character started and ended, and then where her love interest, their motivations, and how they started and ended. I did kind of have hints of the ending that I picked up on, but I just wasn't exactly sure how it was going to play out. And I just felt like at the end, when I got to the ending, that I just don't know if I care enough to continue with the story. So I don't know if I am. We'll see. Because I'm just not sure that it is really my cup of tea, which is fine. Not everything can be our cup of tea. And I did think this one was going to be, but it just didn't turn out in the end to be all to my liking. I just don't feel that motivated to read it, whether it be for the plot or for the characters. And I really don't have a good reason why. I don't. I feel like the problem I have with romantasy is it has a balance, right, of fantasy and romance, but often I feel like what happens is that we're building up to the romance, and that's where the buildup really is. That's where I feel like a lot of the tension is put into the book, and then about time that I get to the end where they get together, and then they get torn apart again, I'm just like, oh, we gotta do this all over again. And I'm just not sure that that's it for me. Like, that type of romance in a fantasy. I think the reason, like, for example, I like Emily Wilde's kind of cozy fantasy with romance kind of situation, and like the Mirror Visitor series, is that the romance, I think it's a little more balanced in the stories because it isn't a romantasy. It's not putting as much emphasis, so I feel like there's more of a balance, and I think I like that balance a little bit more, which honestly is a great thing for me to learn, because if I'm writing a fantasy, I do like to have some romance in my fantasy. I think that's fun. I like having characters to root for to get together. I enjoy that a lot. So I don't want that not to be in my fantasies. I just think like maybe some of the ones that tend to lean heavier on the romance aspect, maybe a little heavier on the spicy, saucy bits, are not necessarily going to drive me to read them. And I feel like I'm happy to have learned that that's what I personally like, because I think that'll help me steer in the direction of books that I'm interested in later on. I don't know. If you made it to the end of this video, go ahead and drop like a dragon in the comments if you're more of a fantasy reader. If you're more of like a romantasy reader, drop a dragon with a heart. And if you're somewhere in between, like me, I guess, drop a fairy, because when you combine a dragon with the heart, it becomes a fairy. I don't know. Anyway, if you feel like sticking around for a little more bookish nurse content, feel free to like this video and subscribe and do all that good stuff. I upload every Sunday and sometimes on Wednesdays, and I would love to have you stick around and hang out with us here. But in the meantime, I hope you read a good book, I hope you find some joy, and most importantly, I hope you do something wonderful to make the world a better place. And I will see you in my next one. Bye!